Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Texas Rangers franchise here on MLB The Show 21 and the MSM Sports Network. Well, as you can probably guess from this video being uploaded, the live stream had a couple of technical issues, and I do apologize for that. Basically, when I tested it out on my setup earlier before the stream, there was nothing that went wrong, and yet, of course, when it was showtime, there were a couple of bugs that ultimately meant that the stream was cut a little bit short, and so I do apologize if that inconvenienced you. I really was disappointed in how everything turned out. What the purpose of this video, though, is to do is summarize what happened in the offseason, and I did get footage of the second half, some of our big signings, and how the roster looks heading into spring training in 2023. The first thing that you need to know, obviously, is that we signed a couple of new coaches for this year. Jay Valdez was signed last season and provided a stable foundation to bring on pitching coach David Long and third base coach Warner Perez. David Long is a coach who offers not only good clutch velocity and stamina boost, but also a +2 to the walks per 9. And that is something that you must have to be a successful team in the franchise. And David Long provides that. It was very, very easy to get him on board. In fact, he accepted the day after we offered him a contract. Third base coach Warner Perez also accepted a deal for 3 years, and he adds versatility to not only stealing and fielding, but also reaction time, which I think is going to help our outfield tremendously. We've got some older guys in the outfield, and I think that reaction time helps them stay competitive from a defensive standpoint. I had several objectives heading into this offseason, and chief among them was finding a franchise center fielder. Now, I had hoped that Joey Gallow would come back and complete the story after trading him to build up our minor league system. I wanted him to come back and ultimately be the guy that led us to a World Series championship. Unfortunately, the San Diego Padres really liked Joey Gallow and the production that he's shown and inked him to a 5-year, $110 million contract extension to keep him in San Diego. It was tough to see Joey not hit the open market, but at the same time, I totally understand why he would accept that contract extension. I think we would have offered him more money, but the San Diego Padres were 1 win away from a World Series championship last year, and without a doubt, the Padres are the more competitive team as it stands right now. Elsewhere around the National League, the San Francisco Giants made it clear that they were going for a World Series title, signing Aaron Judge to a ludicrously expensive deal through 2030, totaling over $180 million. But they didn't stop there. The Giants also signed Byron Buxton, the speedy center fielder who rejected an extension from the Minnesota Twins, and now Buxton and Judge patrol the exact same outfield. The NL West is going to be incredibly competitive for several years to come, with the Dodgers being the best team in baseball and the Padres and Giants just one step behind them. Looking towards the American League West, we got terrible news from a couple of conference rivals as Tim Anderson, the man who I felt was more responsible for eliminating the Rangers in the ALDS than any other player on the White Sox roster, is now a Seattle Mariner. Tim Anderson accepted a very nice contract through 2027 to be the new second baseman or shortstop for the Mariners, whichever they decide, and he will be playing every day in the American League West. But it didn't stop there. Trey Turner also inked a contract in division, signing with the Oakland Athletics and becoming the second premier shortstop to join the American League West this season behind Tim Anderson. Of course, Trevor Story is already our shortstop, so 3 of the 5 AL West teams have 90+ rated shortstops or better. Turner and Story, without a doubt, are the 2 best, but Tim Anderson also being in the division is scary as well. You see what Trey Turner did in his career with the Washington Nationals. He now joins the Oakland A's, who are trying to build out of the cellar, and he's going to be there for quite some time. A backloaded deal that will pay Turner $25.2 million in 2031 has the AL West on all kinds of notice. Here's a look at some of the transactions that took place. Mike Clevenger goes to the Boston Red Sox. Colton Wong to the Washington Nationals. Anthony Rizzo signs with the Rays. And you see some of the other ones as we scroll down. Gary Sanchez, 4 years, $30 million with the Brewers were the main moves. And then our big move comes in. The Texas Rangers have found their new center fielder. Ketel Marte is coming to Texas on a 3-year, $46.6 million deal. You get a look at Ketel in his brand new Ranger threads. He'll wear the number 4, the same number that he's worn for the majority of his career. And Ketel is just 29 years old, 87 overall, and he is improving. Last season with Arizona, the team that he spent the most of his career with, 254 the average, 23 bombs, and 90 RBIs as well. He strikes out less than 10% of the time and works 54 walks in there as well. Plus, he stole 13 bags, and that's something that I'd like to hopefully see him increase this season. He doesn't necessarily have the best speed in the world, but he's agile enough to where I think he should be a threat on the base paths. Joe Musgrove goes to the White Sox as they add more pitching depth. The AL Central really got crazy with some of their signings, and you look at two of the guys that we're interested in bringing on board now. Aaron Sanchez to be that 5th starter, and then Delino DeShields to offer more depth in the outfield. Remember, I wanted to sign him last year, but the Braves got him. And speaking of the AL Central going crazy, Edwin Diaz just signed a 6-year, $100 million deal with the Detroit Tigers. Apparently, the Tigers are in win now mode. Now, you saw that we did not get Sanchez. He signed with the Padres for less money, but we did get Delino DeShields, and as a result, we still have one starting pitcher spot that I want to go after. And I found Tyler Beatty, a guy who has not pitched in the major leagues the last 2 years, but we would offer him a 1-year, $1.5 million contract, and he would accept. As you see other middle infield contracts going through, Whit Merrifield goes to the rival White Sox, and of course, Tim Anderson ends up signing with the Mariners. Well, Tyler Beatty did sign with Texas, and he's a guy that I'm really interested in seeing how he develops, but his battery mate will not be the same that we've seen through the first 2 years. I'm going to go ahead and move Jose Trevino, who is 30 years old now, for this prospect, Samuel Basallo from the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers, like I said, appear to be in win now mode, and they need a major league ready catcher to help with their young pitching staff. The Rangers, on the other hand, have Sam Huff and Randy Florentino, who are ready to play right now, plus Dan Porton is coming up through the pipeline. So I felt comfortable making that move. Basallo was split time with David Garcia down at AA, while Dan Porton and Matt Watley will be the AAA catchers. Well, we went to the Rule 5 draft, and Texas did have 2 spots open on the 40-man roster, but we decided not to ultimately fill either of those. As you get a look at some of the top prospects that were taken, JT Ginn is going to slot in, I believe, as the number 2 starter in the Detroit Tigers rotation, so again, more moves being made by them. We did have a chance to draft Luis Perdomo from the Padres organization, but I just didn't really feel like going ahead and making that move. I wanted to build our roster more organically and leave some of those top prospects alone. Well, we go ahead and try and sign Kyle Cody. We're going to bring him back on a minor league deal, and we're going to bring Zach DeLoach in as well for added outfield depth. He was a former Texas A&M Aggie, a guy that I covered while I was in college. Had to bring him on board. You see the arbitration hearings that go through as well for both Taylor Hearn and Brett Martin. They're both making the exact same money. As now we're scrolling through the trade acquisitions. Some minor moves made, although the Red Sox get Andrew Heaney from the Angels. And again, I'll go through some of the highlights of the final rosters when we get there. Well, finally, here's a look at the lineup as it will stand heading into spring training. And we are going to get through spring training in this offseason episode. I wanted to get the young guys, the less secure players, as many at-bats at the beginning of the spring training session as I possibly could. So you get a look at who is on the roster as well. Most of the starters are on the bench. And here's a look at our pitching rotation heading into spring. Again, Beatty, Gore, Rodriguez, Krause, and Burke will be the starters. I want to see what they can do in a starting capacity. Tyler Beatty and Yuri Rodriguez are competing for that 5th starter spot. and also maybe the long reliever spot as well. So a lot of battles to go down here in the spring, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. Of course, with any offseason, it brings some difficult decisions, and a couple of those were made to release certain players, including Adolis Garcia. Garcia struggled to make any sort of impact last season, hitting just .216 without any true power numbers. Despite having a decent final game of the ALDS, I just felt like Garcia is getting up there in age and really doesn't offer a ton that we couldn't find anywhere else. I was just disappointed with how little Garcia did with the opportunity. Remember, we didn't trade him last offseason in hopes that he would develop into something, but he didn't, and as a result, we released Adolis Garcia to make room on our roster. We also released guys like Hyunjung Yang, who really pitched well in the long relief capacity, but we've got so many pitchers in our organization, I just decided that Yang was a casualty that we could afford to make, so we cut him and released him to be a free agent. Maybe more contentiously, though, we cut Dane Dunning. We released Dunning this offseason to make more room for guys like Yuri Rodriguez, Hans Kraus, and Tyler Phillips. Plus, we're looking forward to the days when Cole Winn and Hank Lyons can join the organization, and Dunning just isn't improving. He's 28 years old, a 73 overall. He doesn't have good strikeout numbers, and as we saw down the stretch of last season in the playoffs, he also had the ability to get hit pretty hard. The last move that we made was releasing Spencer Patton. I believe we tried to pass him through waivers just as an attempt to keep him in the organization, and Toronto claimed him. So Spencer Patton heading north of the border to pitch for the Blue Jays. Well, after simulating the first half of spring training, the Texas Rangers are doing something that I've never seen any of my franchises do in MLB The Show, and that's lead the way in spring training. After getting off to a 1-4 start, the Rangers are now 12-6 and playing really good baseball. Of course, none of it actually matters, but as we scroll down through some of the players here, the Rangers are getting good production from several of their starters and guys that I'm going to depend on going forward into this season. I think you notice that some of the backups are struggling, but also notably, Nick Solak is struggling. He's 0 for 14 in spring, and I was wondering if he'd been striking out a ton, because if you might notice from our gameplay, I strike out with Solak a ton. He's not very good at hitting the breaking ball at all, even though his plate vision is 71, which is, average to slightly above average, but I'm just really bad at hitting a slider with him. He's only struck out 3 times out of the 14 at-bats that he's recorded. He's also worked a couple of walks. So in the long run, I'm not too concerned about him. What I am a little bit concerned about is our outfield battle. Julio Pablo Martinez is raking right now, hitting .321, and of course, the main issue with that is I'm running out of roster spots. You got a guy like Ronald Guzman who's hitting .296, a little bit of power. He is down to his last chance to make an MLB roster. If we send him down, we'll use his final minor league option, and that would really reduce his ability to be traded. I'd like for him to start on the major league roster and then maybe trade him instead of sending him down if he's not performing, but I'm kind of getting painted into a corner right now. The outfielders that we have are, of course, Ketel Marte, Tyler Naquin, Willie Calhoun, and then David Dahl. So that means that we have one spot left to have one more guy on the roster, and that really is between Jason Martin and JP Martinez. The problem is that I wanted Jason Martin to make the roster. He's got a lot of versatility when it comes to defending, but also a little bit of power that he's shown. And JP Martinez has hit the ball decently well at the big league level, but never with any power. So that isn't really going according to plan. Martin might have to get sent down and use that second minor league option, while JP Martinez might just make the big league roster. It also looks like Delino DeShields is going to get sent down, hitting just .139. Good news, though, is that he gets a fresh slate of minor league options thanks to the new one-year deal that we signed him to. So we moved ahead into the final week of spring training, and the Rangers continue to win, but the most important task now is to figure out who we're sending down and who we're keeping up. As you can see, I've whittled down the lineup to just a few extra guys, and in fact, there's just one extra position player. Sam Huff, Yanni Hernandez, and Julio Pablo Martinez all made the roster, and it was ultimately a decision that I had to make between Josh Young and Ronald Guzman. Now, Guzman has slightly better numbers than Young in the spring training session, but he's just not as versatile, and he was going to be on his last minor league option heading into next season with still 3 years of team control, and I really just had to realize that we don't have a spot for him. Nate Lowe is obviously our first baseman right now, although he did struggle in spring training for the second year in a row. We saw what he could do in the regular season and the power numbers that he posted in the postseason as well. So I decided to keep Josh Young and look to move Ronald Guzman. When I was searching around, I found this trade. It allows the Rangers to move Ronald Guzman to a team that I think he's going to start for from day one, and that's the Baltimore Orioles. They have a number of first basemen on the roster, but Seth Mejias Breen is the top-rated one, and he's 31 years old and not even 70 overall. Obviously, Ronald Guzman is far better than that, 75 overall. He offers some power and a little bit of defensive versatility in left field as well. With so many minor league shortstops and middle infielders, including even reaching over to third base with Espinoza, Apostle, Wenzel, just a number of guys on the roster, I figured we could move Jax Biggers as well. He's played well at AAA, but I just don't have a spot for him right now. And in return, we're going to get 21-year-old Colby Mayo from the Baltimore Orioles. Mayo has decent hitting numbers for a 21-year-old out of Florida, but what really interests me is that arm over in the hot corner. His fielding certainly needs to come up a little bit, but he's got the arm to play a major league third base. So we would offer this trade to the Baltimore Orioles, and they would be happy to accept. Again, I think we get a developmental player to stash at third base, and the Orioles likely get their opening day first baseman. Here's a look at what our starting rotation is going to look like heading into opening day 2023. Tyler Glasnow will once again be our ace. Carlos Martinez is back and healthy and had a great spring training, going 3-0. I'm going to promote Mackenzie Gore to the third spot in the rotation. I think he's ready to take the next step in his career. Tyler Beatty makes the major league rotation as well. He'll be our number 4 starter. And Wes Benjamin, who had the best season out of anyone last season, will be our 5th starter again. Basically, I'm doing this just to separate the two left-handers and ensure that lineups don't get to stay the same in back-to-back games. Also, I don't really think that Benjamin's going to get much better. I truly think that this is his ceiling at a 76 overall. He is 29 years old, and so I am expecting him maybe to fall off just a little bit, and I'd rather have that be in our 5th spot than maybe up here in the 3rd rotational spot. Over in the bullpen, Yuri Rodriguez had a really good spring training, and I think I'm actually going to keep him in the long relief role. Now that means that we have to get rid of one more pitcher, and you see I've whittled it down to these guys right now. Every single one of them is safe except for the following few. Hunter Wood, I don't know if he's going to continue to pitch at this level, but gosh, he's making this so tough on me. His whip is a little bit high, but that 1.8 ERA through 10 innings is really hard to ignore. Taylor Hearn maybe had the worst spring training out of everyone in the normal rotation, nearly an ERA of 6 and a whip above 2.3, but I'm willing to write that off as more of a spring training aberration than what he's actually going to produce. Now, Colby Allard has pitched really well in spring training, and he's had these moments of brilliance that always make me want to keep him at the big league level, but I just don't know if it's going to translate into the regular season. I've been fooled before where he's pitched really solidly at AAA and then not done hardly anything at the major league level, and Brett Martin didn't get a ton of work, but he was going to be safe anyway. So I had to decide who I was going to send down, and in the end, I actually decided to send Colby Allard down for right now. It's going to use his final minor league option, and I don't really like to do that, but I just think that Colby is in a spot right now where he's kind of out of luck. I just don't have a roster spot for him right now, and I think that eventually this roster spot, Hunter Woods, becomes available. But right now, I'm not going to take Wood out of the rotation when he's pitching so well. An ERA of 1.8 is hard to argue against, and so Colby Allard ultimately would start the year in AAA. The last thing to make you aware of before we set the final opening day roster is that 2 other players are also out of options now. Sherten Apostle has used all 3 of his minor league options after being sent down. We did just sign him to a 2-year extension, plus he has 3 more years of team control left. The other player is DJ Peters, who we actually acquired in year 1 for Delino DeShields, and obviously Delino is now back on the team. DJ has had a brief stint with the Rangers the last 2 seasons, and he's done all right, just never really has had that roster space to carve himself out a role. So DJ is now out of options heading into next season and is sort of in danger of not having a roster spot come 2024. Well, spring training comes to a conclusion, and the Texas Rangers have won the Cactus League. This is truly the first time that I've ever had this happen in any of my franchises. I always do terribly in spring training, but the Rangers go 18-9 and beat the Dodgers by 2 games. Again, not that that means anything, but here's a look at the final spring training stats for your Texas Rangers, and this lineup a little bit subject to change. I might tweak it as we get closer to opening day, but here are the final roster spots regardless. JP Martinez had a whale of a spring training on his hands, and Ketel Marte performed well in his new threads. 305, he's going to be batting leadoff for us, I think, right now, and I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table. The final pitching numbers and rotation look like this, and our pitching rotation really impressed me this season. Yuri Rodriguez had a bad outing towards the end of spring training. That's why his ERA jumped, but I'm still confident in the moves that I made, and I like where we've got our team right now. I feel pretty good about the direction of this team heading in. Again, maybe not a World Series contender, but I still think that we can challenge for the American League West. I think we can defend our crown even, and I really feel confident heading into opening day and this 2023 season. Well, we head into the regular season, and we're taking on the Kansas City Royals on opening day at home for the first time in this franchise's history. Tyler Glasnow against Noah Syndergaard will be one of the more premier matchups that you see on opening day. Here's a quick flip through the schedule. You can pause this at any time if you really want to study it, but it's a loaded schedule. I think the month of June is going to be particularly challenging. Maybe July a little bit easier with some of the AL East opponents that we face. And then August gets really tough too, as we're at home versus the Giants, Astros, and Yankees, but on the road pretty much the rest of the time. We spend almost the entire month of September at home and then close on the road against the A's and the Angels. The last thing that I'll show you is the top prospects list. I haven't really done a good job of keeping you updated with this. The Rangers haven't had much to look at on this list despite having a plethora of really solid prospects, but Robert Hassel leads our organization. He is the number 17th prospect in all of Major League Baseball. And then we have one more on the list as well, Blaine Inlow, who will start this year at AAA. He comes in at number 34 on the list. So we've got a direction for this franchise. We've won an American League West championship, and now we focus on really contending for the World Series. It should be a good one, and I'm glad y'all are along for year 3 of the Texas Rangers franchise. Until next time, so long, everybody.